Panchakapachubhyascha kripasindivevicha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So I am going to continue on with my story of how I came to Krishna consciousness. I thought I would do it in one go, but actually I covered maybe the 50s through the 50s in America and my growing up at that time, and now I'll go into the 60s. I'm trying not to make it too long, but I want to cover the story. I mean, I'm telling it, the whole point of it is to see how Krishna ropes us in and brings us back to him. So it's all of our stories, and this is just one in thousands, so I'll go ahead with it. So previously, I described the kind of booming prosperity of the 50s and, the feeling of widespread stability. And those feelings began to really shatter as the 60s began, ushering in a really tumultuous decade. Many things happened to change the environment. Of course, in I think 61, the USA entered into the Vietnam War, and soon after there was a Cuban Missile Crisis and a lot of fear of nuclear annihilation, which led to ban the bomb protests against nuclear bombs and energy. And of course, the civil rights movement was really pushing forward, and the Supreme Court finally ruled for the first time a black student could go to the University, I think, of Mississippi. Imagine, it's not that long ago that they had to fight to just go to college. And despite all of that, Martin Luther King was killed, his famous "I Have a Dream." Well, he was killed despite that. And then I think it was soon after, around the same time, the Kennedy assassination, which was really a big deal. I remember, I was a kid, but it was just like all you could see on TV over and over and over. You keep seeing this horrible assassination. And the industrialization and mega expansion of the factories, it was really increasing kind of meaningless work for a lot of people. And that decade became kind of the decade of music, where it was really, it was really became a medium for social and political revolt, more or less. For the first time, actually, really, in history, it was the first time that the music was really geared specifically to the young people. So you had, Bob Dylan coming in, and of course the Beatles, I think it was 64, 65. The first time they were on the Ed Sullivan Show, there was something like 70 million people that watched that. It was really a big thing going on, And so, I was going into my teens and hearing about all of these things going on. And I began to feel a greater and greater sense of dissatisfaction with kind of the status quo. And, we'd been taught as we were growing up in the United States that, this is U.S. stands for freedom and equality for every individual. And, we're a government that's by the people and for the people. And but the events that were going on around us, they were just too troubling to dismiss. They were telling a different story. And we're seeing all this racial bigotry and So this kind of declaration that we've been fed that all men are created equal, it started to ring really hollow to many people. And so, what to speak of the presence of the bomb and the Vietnam War and all these problems, they seemed, really immediate and they seemed crushing. So that compelled many of the youth from, to be active, to become active and try to change things. And things started to get quite turbulent. And personally, I just started to question everything. I knew I did not want to become just, a well-adjusted citizen in what seemed to me to be a kind of crazy society. So the first thing that went out the window was organized religion. I had enjoyed going to church when I was young, but then, you start really waking up, looking around, and I saw, well, hey, this is mostly just like a social thing. Everybody dresses up and they go to the coffee hour afterwards. And, I wasn't so impressed. And I also, came to know of the violent religious histories of the Crusades and the Protestants against the Catholics. And, and I used to go to these, the kids went to the football games on the weekend. And at one of the schools, and the priests, it was a Catholic school, and the priests used to come out, and I saw that they would be there smoking and drinking and kind of just being around the young people. And I thought, I don't know, I just didn't see how that stuff had anything to do with the Jesus that, I used to read about. And I was like, nah, this is really not for me. I'm not interested, And then my brother had a friend that used to come over, Frank Knopf, and he kind of introduced me to, Bob Dylan and social issues and, political rebelliousness, and I became a vegetarian. And of course, I soon started to smoke pot and take other drugs. And, was just totally immersed in the music that was majorly affecting the youth at that time. Because it was like the musicians were the philosophical leaders. And their words were like moving people to act. There's like James Brown, he's singing, I'm black and I'm proud. And the Beatles with all their, give peace a chance. And of course, all of George Harrison's songs. And of course, that was a bit later. But, it wasn't just about, Bebop Baby. There was a lot of, especially folk singers like Joni Mitchell, sing songs about, it was like the beginning of ecological concern. I remember that song, how you're paving, can't remember the words, paving paradise, put up a parking lot, and then there was like, I mean, probably most people don't even remember, but I remember these Animals were a popular band, and they had this song about, we're all one, your neighbor is your brother, I'm part of you, you're part of me, and of course Dylan's all his Blowing in the Wind and Times Are Changing and Like a Rolling Stone, and, all these songs were, really affecting the young people. And so this was what was interesting, what was going on in these areas. And so, at this time I'm going into high school, and I just completely lost interest in school altogether. Up to that point, I was, I got really good marks and I did good, but I just it just didn't seem so relevant anymore. I just didn't think I was learning things that I wanted to learn. And in fact, I don't even remember hardly anything from high school. I remember two things. I remember two teachers. One was Mr. Matsumoto, my science teacher. And he wanted us to do these little experiments on these little baby chicks, that we would shoot. We were supposed to shoot something into them, and it was terrible. I refused, and then I was sent to the principal, and I was suspended from school. I'm like, no way, no way. I hated that guy, and he hated me. It was really clear. So that was the one teacher. And the other one was Mr. O'Brien. I remember nothing else. I just remember these two teachers, two experiences, one good, one bad. Mr. O'Brien, that was in 11th grade, and he taught, I still remember this big gray book, and it was called The Transcendentalists. And it was like suddenly I woke up like, oh my God, this guy's talking about something interesting. And he used to like challenge us and make us think, and we'd read about Emerson and Thoreau and all the, Western transcendentalists. And so that was my one good experience. But for the most part, I skipped school. I found out how many days you actually had to attend in order to graduate. And that is exactly the number of days that I went to school. And, I saw pretty much, if you just had common sense, you could get through, you could pass things, But so I would go to friends' houses, and I had older friends and stuff, and I just stay there during the day and whatever, listen to music, smoke pot, and educate myself with what I was interested into. I read like crazy, and mostly books that were, some spiritual or something about societies, like J.D. Salinger, Franny and Zoe, Huxley, Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, and The Doors of Perception, George Orwell, Animal Farm. This is the stuff, that a lot of the hippies were reading, especially like Herman Hesse, Siddhartha, and of course the totally Jack Kerouac, one of the original hippies, On the Road, and the Dharma Bums. And Tibetan Book of the Dead and the I Ching, that was like, had to, I practically lived my life, reading the I Ching. Should I go down to the corner and, do this or that? Have to throw the I Ching. And, naturally, Autobiography of a Yogi, and all the Carlos Castaneda, the teachings of Don Juan, basically about, experiences with peyote. And there was just a ton of Mayavadi literature. That was what really came into the, a lot of hippies were looking into Eastern philosophies, but mostly what they were reading about was all Mayavad stuff, Krishnamurti, Alan Watts. So, yeah, it was interesting, but there was no personalism. And so I was drifting far away from normal life, but I kept up appearances. I didn't want to disturb my family, and they didn't want to be disturbed. So they just, kind of turned a blind eye. And but finally, in my last year of high school, that was a year that they drafted over, like, I think 500,000 boys right out of school. And these were like friends, my friends, going off. They had no idea they're going off to some jungle with the guns, to shoot people. And we started hearing these horrific tales about what was happening. And this was just, it was really hitting home. This can't be right, So there was student uprisings, and there was riots, and there was police beatings. And also around the same time in Detroit, where I'm from, There were mega race riots, and in other parts of the country also. So, by this time, the whole hippie countercultural revolution was really expanding, and it made sense to me, to turn on and tune in and drop out, as the saying was. And it was just this feeling. The youth had this like need for urgent change, to just break away from the traditional ways of life and the notions of what actual success means, and to give up, the limiting belief systems that we were brought up in. And, just feeling the need to explore unconventional lifestyles that placed maybe a higher value on love and individual freedom, and to embrace diversity and, to some extent, spiritual growth. That was all, at least in theory, these were things that people were. So all kinds of, groups started cropping up, for the gays and the student rights and the women's liberation. And, of course, women's liberation looked quite different at that time. The women were into not buying into any, like what you're supposed to look like. They were into the natural look, not fashion, being told what you should wear in order to be pretty. And, so women were kind of into just girls, into their wearing their hair down and straight and no makeup and braless and whatever. But it was quite different than what it's evolved into now. And, of course, that was accompanied by this sexual revolution, which really changed everything in society. The pill, that just became available around that time. And so that really changed. It was the first time any drug was designed for a social and not medical purposes. And so, U.S. society, it began to change very rapidly. There was a lot more divorce, more women working in the workforce, more single parents. And basically, there was just U.S. society became divided. There was like this huge gap between the young and the old. And so, after high school, I was like counting the days, but somehow or another, my mother got me some job. And then, out of respect for her, I went for 2 weeks, and then I was like, oh my God, this is just sheer torture. And I just thought, this is just not for me. And I quit, and I never looked back. And so I left home, and I moved to the downtown Detroit, to the inner city, where, all the hippies and rebels lived. And started to live this kind of new lifestyle. Eventually, I was down there for a little while, and then I finally got my own house right near the Grandy Ballroom, which was the big music venue that everyone went to in Detroit. And it was a black neighborhood. It was a very cheap little house because it was a dangerous neighborhood. But, the hippies and the black people and the bikers and everybody all got on very well, no problem. And the police didn't really interfere much. So, at first it seemed great. There's a lot of talk about changing the world. But for the most part, people were listening to music, partying, and taking drugs, so. And then, of course, you may wonder about finances. I began to sell drugs You have to understand that at the time it seemed like that was an altruism. That was a good job. That was a good work. You were helping others to expand their consciousness. And, I even had a good humor truck. It's like a truck, ice cream truck that goes down the streets, and, you ring the bell and kids come out and get popsicles. So I used to drive around in that, and that way I could also deliver drugs. Who would suspect the good humor girl? But yeah, it's a little sad and embarrassing, looking back, but this is what was going on. And, my house became like the center place because it was right near the music venue. So all the bands, people from the bands would come, and there would be parties, and, so you had a good chance to meet all the cool people, so-called. But, actually it was it was a lesson, because I saw, really, what's so cool about these people? Mostly they just want to find a girl and get some drugs. And, apart from, I remember meeting some of the Steve Miller Band, and there was a guy that was in Tyrannosaurus Rex that used to come over, and, we could sit at the kitchen table and have philosophical discussions. But, this is when Krsna started to push his way into my life. I noticed, first of all, I'd heard that there's a devotee named Eric and Adele, married couple, and they had a farm in Ann Arbor. And so a lot of the people that came to my house, they all used to go to Ann Arbor also, because that was like another kind of hippie place to go for fun. And I heard that Eric was chanting Hare Krishna, and that he even had he had like a room. I mean, I guess it was a temple room where, you would chant Hare Krishna. So that was interesting. And then I remember finding a Easy Journey to Other Planet. It was a mimeographed, stapled together copy. So it must have been one of the, first books ever done. And no one knew where it came from. It was just next to my bed, on a little table next to my bed. And every day I used to pick that up and look. It was so odd, that cover with, it's all the planets with the Vishnu's four-armed forms. And, I kept thinking that this is really, really important, but I just couldn't enter into it. I see that now, that until there's a certain, I don't know, you have to move forward adequately, or a little bit of piety, or a little agyata sagriti, or a little something that opens the door. And it was like, even though I read so much, I kept trying to read Easy Journey to Other Planets, and I just couldn't get through it. Somehow I couldn't enter, but I kept picking it up. So, they say those are like time bombs, Prabhupada's books. Well, I think it was like that, I just kept picking it up, and I was touching it, and I was looking at it, but I wasn't really getting it. I didn't get what was inside of it, which is odd, because I read a lot of philosophy books, but it was like a door that I just couldn't open at that time. But then also a friend of mine, it was her birthday, and she wanted a poster of Lord Shiva, at the head shops. They would sell all the Indian posters from India. And I didn't know who was who. So I just went, and she had told me she wanted for her birthday, she wanted Lord Shiva. And so I went to the head shop, and I looked at all the pictures that were up there, and I just thought, oh, I think it's that one, so it was Krishna. And she was disappointed. She was maybe more of a Shiva Bhakta. But she put it up anyway. And I remember that we always used to kind of hang out in her room where she had this picture. And I remember very regularly looking at this picture and thinking, it's that picture, Krishna standing in Vrindavan, and there's like the big moon behind him, and it's sort of like a nighttime picture, sort of. And I kept thinking, I never even wondered, who is that? Who's Krishna? That's how, you can just be so covered that I didn't see, but I just thought, I wish I could be there. I remember thinking that many times. I just want to be in that place. That place looks like so nice. So I was thinking about the place in the picture, but I wasn't thinking about the person. Ay. And then, so many years later, I was on the roof of the guest house in Vrindavan and looking out in the nighttime, and the moon was up, and it looked exactly like that picture, the whole scenery. And I thought, oh my God, Krishna heard me, and here I am. I came to this place. So yes, even just sticking up a poster in a house, it has a profound effect. And, but anyway, it was a crazy place. It was dangerous. One day there was this black man, old man, broke in and with a knife, and he tied us up, and I don't know. I mean, I guess he just wanted to steal things, but I was like, we better do what this guy says. He's put your hands behind your back. He gagged, me and a friend, my girlfriend. And I thought, yeah, what do they do in the movies? That you put your head up when they're putting the gag on, and so then you can go like this and it'll fall down. It actually worked. And same with your hands, if you twist them a bit, So anyway, I got out of it, and I pulled off the gag of my friend, and she just started screaming bloody murder. And so the guy got scared, and he went away, and she ran out onto the porch and screaming. Everybody's coming out, and I was like, oh no, the police are going to come. We've got an attic full of kilos of marijuana, and so I ran up and was throwing everything into plastic bags and threw it out the back window, and police came, and somehow they just, we said, no, everything's okay. It was just some black guy. And a few days later, when we were all out of the house, the police broke into our house and stole. They had seen we had a safe. They broke open the safe, took thousands of dollars, took all the drugs. So who do you call when you get robbed by the police? So this was the kind of environment, the kind of environment that was going on. And, till this time, I was not having a bad experience. I thought it was having a pretty positive experience with drug taking. I imagined that it was helping me to expand my consciousness and to see the unity of all beings and our oneness. And, my family, they probably were totally distraught, but they didn't interfere. And, I tried to call them from time to time and tried to be normal. But eventually I drove out to California with one of my friends in a little Volkswagen Bug. And, San Francisco, the hippie dream. And I had friends out there and stayed in a very great, beautiful place in Corte Madera. And a lot of the musicians lived in that area, Janis Joplin, Grateful Dead, Moody Blues. So, it was a cool place, supposedly. And so I wound up in Golden Gate Park where I saw the devotees for the first time chanting. I mean, I'd heard about the devotees and I'd heard about the mantra, but a little from a distance. I believe it was the first time I saw the devotees. And I was absolutely fascinated by them. I remember staring and, really studying them as they were chanting, because I could see that, there was all kinds of musicians out there. Everybody was like playing music, and that was Hippie Hill. That's what was going on. But I could see what they were doing was not the same. They weren't there. I mean, I didn't have the words to define it, but it was like devoid of false ego is what it was that was attracting me. Like I was looking at their eyes and I said, they're not doing this for us. They're not putting on a show. This is not a show. This is something really different. And so I chanted with them. And a friend of mine who was, really loved the chanting, and she had just picked up a stray dog that day who she named Krsna, which was really not so good, calling the dog Krsna, but it meant that we kept hearing Krishna, Krishna, Krishna all the time. And then I started running into devotees here and there, so much so that I started to feel like I was, being, tracked by them or something, that I noticed that every time, because everyone hitchhiked in those days, so you just get around by sticking your thumb out. So 3 or 4 times I was hitchhiking somewhere, and I got dropped off right in front of the Hare Krishna temple. And by the 3rd or 4th time, I thought, oh my God, I'm really supposed to go in there because I keep getting dropped off here. But I could feel that I had this resistance. Even when I saw the devotees chanting, I was intrigued, but when sometimes they walked around and I always looked away, like I didn't really want them. There was some resistance. I didn't really want to talk to them. And so I thought, what's wrong with me? Obviously this is the universe is telling me that this is where you should go. You keep getting dropped off here. So, why am you're supposed to be all, free of inhibitions. You should be able to just go in there. All right, okay, I'm telling myself I'll go in there. So I did go in there, and I had this experience of feeling like I just walked into another dimension. And I just remember that it was a little dark, and there was incense billowing, and there were devotees in there, and no one said anything to me or invited me right in. And I just suddenly had this feeling of panic. And I thought, I'm going to get out of here. So I left, running away from Krishna. How many lifetimes trying to still run away from Krishna? And so then I just left, and I thought, why did I do that? Why didn't I just talk to somebody? I don't know. And then I get down to the corner, and I'm about to cross the street, and what pulls up is a van with Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare written on the side. And there was a devotee inside there. And he stuck his head out the window and said, hey, Hare Krishna, why don't you come to the temple? And I was like, yeah, I was just there. Thanks. Bye. So, and then as it turns out, I stayed, staying at different houses there at different times, and it turned out that I was one of the people that was staying in this house was the brother of Aravinda, who was Srila Prabhupada's servant at the time. And this guy, I don't remember his name, but he used to say, let's go see my brother's the servant of the guru, so we should go over there. And I was like, yeah, we should. Let's have another joint. And somehow or another, I think I acted as Maya Devi in that he kind of wanted to go to the temple, and I kept kind of wanting to go, but not enough to actually go. And then I remember going to the Haight-Ashbury Clinic, and it's just a free clinic where people, if they wanted to see a doctor, could go. So it was just hippies in there. And so they're all passing a joint around in this clinic. And there was a devotee sitting next to me, and he was chanting japa. That was the first time I heard japa. And he was chanting, he had his eyes closed, and he was just, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Krishna. I mean, and we were all kind of looking at each other like, what's wrong with this guy? And so I would nudge him and pass the joint to him, and he would just go, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. I guess he was having a hard time being a brahmachari or staying away from drugs, but it wasn't very impressive. And so the second time it came around, I said, really, I think you should take a toke, you need to relax. So again, some connection with a devotee. And then I remember another time I was hitchhiking, and a devotee came over to hitchhike with me. So we had some words. I don't remember. Some hippie van stopped and picked us up, and we got in the back, and there's a few, hippies in there. And there was there were different pictures and beads, like a typical hippie van. And there was a picture of some guru there. And that devotee that got in with me, he pulled that picture off of the wall of the van and threw it out the window. And we were like, wow, what are you doing? And he said, that guy's a demon. That was like about the most uncool thing you could say at that time. Everybody's supposed to do their thing, and we have to let each other do our thing, whatever that thing may be. And then the person who was driving, he just pulled over and he said, you got to get out, So he got out. So I didn't have, I wasn't having like super positive experiences with the devotees. But, in the meantime, I'm just dabbling in everything out in California. And you have to understand, there were very, very different experiences amongst hippies. You had the hippies that were like sort of more in the mode of goodness. They were more the back to nature, communal living type people, into mysticism and yoga and vegetarian. And macrobiotics was really popular at that time. But I could understand. I thought, they're so finicky about what they're eating, but then they're smoking and taking any drugs that somebody gives them. So, it seems a little... But and there was a lot of people this is a beginning, of all the yoga. And so a friend of mine was really into Kundalini yoga, and he was like into this raising of the Kundalini. And, of course, at the same time, you're not following any principles of yoga, and you're doing these things with your prana, with your life force. And that I saw, he went completely crazy. He went crazy because he was doing these things. And so there was a lot people were playing with fire, and it started to become a little more clear to me. And then there's the passionate hippies, more in the mode of passion, that are into, the protesting and trying to change things, and into heavy music. And then, of course, there were, many who are just completely immersed in ignorance and, lazy party animals. So there was a lot of things going on, but, I started to see, a bit of a crack in my ideals of, things are not always so good, we're not necessarily doing anything so wonderful here. You started to see more the effects of drugs and, kind of like homeless hippies and venereal disease and unwanted pregnancy, and, you know, and also just the hypocrisy of, you know, being so against the mainstream, but at the same time utilizing all the things that they provide, like, you know, the roads, the food, you know, you take advantage of everything that people have provided, you know, and then you just, it wasn't adding up. Things were not adding up, but, you know. And I remember being in Corte Madera in this very, very beautiful spot and looking out and thinking, well, you know, I'm here. This is where a lot of people would like to be. This is supposed to be it, you know. But I had a very clear sense that nothing was changing. You know, my inside was not changing. What I was changing was the backdrop. It just looked like a beautiful backdrop. And before there was a more ugly backdrop in Detroit. But really, things were the same inside. You know, I could understand that a bit. And I got to know, so I was getting a little not so happy with what was going on. And I also had friends there that were really some of the biggest drug suppliers in the whole West Coast. And I saw how they were getting, you know, they were getting rich, you know, and they were, you know, it was pretty mundane. And I started to think, nah, you know, this is also, this is not right. This is not what's happening. I have to go somewhere else. I'm going to go to India. And, you know, I'll go in the Himalayas. I have to just search something else. Or I thought maybe I'll go to Maui, because I heard there were a lot of the disenchanted hippies from California had moved out and were, you know, throwing away, you know, just living in the trees or whatever, you know. So it was, you know, kind of a toss-up. I was leaning towards India, going to India. And so I had an opportunity, which is sort of, you know, embarrassing to tell, but I'm telling the story, so... You know, so some of these really big drug dealers, they would make trips to Mexico, and they had special built Winnebagos. Those were these giant vans that were made to come apart and get filled up with drugs and then brought back over the border. So, you know, I was asked to just go along for the ride, and I would make a very large amount of money. And so I did do that. Crazy, stupid, dangerous, yes, but did do it and did make a lot of money. And so I was going to head off to India, but I thought I'll go back to, I had some reasons why I wanted to go back to Detroit. So I went back to Detroit, got a little distracted, and heard about that there was a big pop festival in Orlando, Florida. So I hitchhiked down to this Orlando pop festival, and there I saw devotees again. A whole group of devotees were chanting, and I was with a bunch of friends, and they were making fun of the devotees, and I didn't like that. And I thought they were being super, you know, very superficial. And so I said, you don't know, these people are so cool. They know so much more than you know. I'm going to go chant with them, you know. So myself and one other girl, we went over and sat down. Later I came to know that that was probably Rupanuga, who was heading up this little team. And so we sat there for most of the day, chanting with the devotees and listening to the philosophy. Now, this is really the first time that I've actually really heard the philosophy from the devotees. So they would like chant for 20 minutes or so, and then he'd speak for 15 minutes and, you know, back and forth. And so we're sitting there. Of course, I've taken, a couple hits of acid, and I'm really, really getting into this chanting. And as he was speaking, it was like all the lights went on, that everything that he said was just crystal clear. Like, it was like he was just pouring nectar into my ear. And I thought, yes, everything he said, yes, I know that's right. And there was no doubt about what he was saying. I knew that somehow, I'd never heard this, but there was, but there's something inside of me coming, that understood this to be true. It didn't feel like new information. It was like something that I woke up to, that I knew. And I was like, aha, aha. I felt like I was just gathering up all these pieces of this puzzle of life, where I'd been, finding little pieces here and there from rock and roll songs and grandma's wisdom, and, and they had all these pieces of a puzzle, and then they just like fell all into place. And it was just amazing. It was an amazing experience. And of course, we must have been there for many hours. And then, started coming down a little bit, and said, hey, Diane, we're missing the pop festival. Maybe we should go. We've been here all day. So we left. And what was interesting is that because we had hitchhiked down from Detroit, and it was wintertime there. It was actually snowing. And then we'd come down, in one day to Florida, where we'd sat out in the sun and chanted the whole day. So I noticed that Diane was puffing up and getting like these little blisters on her face. And then I was like, oh my God, so am I. And to make a long story short, we got something called sun poisoning. And it was terrible. It was terribly painful. And we just swelled up, both of us, like balloons. And we looked like monsters, so we were freaking everybody out. And then we were hiding we found a car that we were hiding in. And it was painful. It was horrible. And we were like, wow, we're really... because we'd been hearing all day about how you're not this body. And it was like we were there with some boys, and these boys, they didn't want anything to do with us anymore because we look like monsters, And so we're going, yeah, I guess we're really getting to realize that we're not this body, and then we'd laugh and but it was real painful, because your eyes were almost shut, so swollen. We had to go to the hospital. And afterwards, Diane, she was like, well, she was really into what we had all heard from the Krishna devotees. And so she said, I'm going to go join them. And I was like, really? Well, I'm not. So she went off hitchhiking her own way. And I went back to Detroit. She did eventually join the temple. She ran into the hog farm first, which was another story. It was quite different from the devotees. But anyway, she did wind up becoming a devotee. But then I went back to Detroit, and then it's hard for me to remember exactly the time frame, but Woodstock was happening, so that was a big thing, to go to Woodstock. So I got there as quickly as possible. I had a lot of drugs, as I always did, and I went behind stage and was doing my altruistic work of giving drugs to to the musicians who were back there. And I remember offering Joan Baez, would you want some mescaline? She's like, no way. And I was very surprised because genuinely everyone will take something. And she said, look. And then she, showed me there was, you could look from behind the stage and you could see the crowd, and it was like, just as far as the eye could see was just, hippies. And she said, I have to face this crowd, And so she was a little realistic about what it would be like to come in front of such a big crowd and sing on her own. So anyway, at one point, I was out in the crowds and I saw in the distance, it looked like to me a bubble of light. And I was with a friend. I said, what is that? Do you see that? Yeah, kind of. And so I became determined by myself. I thought, I got to see what that is. It was this bubble of light. It seemed like everything was dark, and in one place there was light. So I crossed this long field, and of course I'm intoxicated, so things are more dramatic and maybe a little more extreme. But nevertheless, I was really seeing this ball of light. So I finally arrived at the place, and there was some devotees. Now, since then, I've come to think that probably it was Burijan and Tosan Krishna. Maybe there was only two of them. I just remember it was Hare Krishna devotees, and they were chanting Hare Krishna, and they were in a bubble of light. And it just seemed so beautiful in the midst of all of that, because, it was kind of a cool thing, but it started raining. There was mud everywhere. It wasn't all that great. And so, I started this thing. I started to have this this kind of experience of that I keep running into Krishna. And I keep running into Krishna. But at the same time, it's just kind of a brief experience. So anyway, after Woodstock, I returned to Detroit, and I returned to some of the old friends, the place where I used to stay. And I saw a very, very sad scene, is that while I was out in California, so many of the people there, the young people, had gotten into heavy drugs. They were doing heroin and cocaine and things, and the whole scene was just horrible. I mean, it just turned into something very dark, and I was just absolutely, appalled. But I stayed a day with friends, and as I said, I made a lot of money, so I had that cash on me. And those friends stole all that money, my money for India. But that was what happens, that one thing leads to another, and it was a very, very sad story. And soon after that, I went to another pop festival that was in Detroit, and I just was getting more and more distance from this whole scene, and wondering what to do. And so I wasn't enjoying myself, so I came up, and I climbed up kind of a hill at the pop festival, and was just kind of observing what was going on. And while I was up that hill, someone got shot, and I saw it, and I heard it, and I saw everybody running, and I was just watching like it was some terrible bad movie. And but then I saw the devotees were there, and the devotees, rather than running, they ran to the person who was shot and was now laying on the ground alone. And they surrounded that person, and they were chanting. And, it was just like they were just angels that were the ones that were left there. And it was so visible to me, and I thought, oh my God, look at this. What is this? What is this scene becoming? But I was so touched by what I saw, how the devotees were behaving and how they were caring for that person. They waited till, an ambulance came, and one of the devotees was, probably chanting to the person. I don't know what happened to that person, but so another experience with the devotees that Krishna was showing me again and again. And soon I wound up going out to Eric's farm. We've heard about Eric, who was becoming a devotee. So I don't know how, but I wound up that there were some hippies that were staying on his farm out in the forest in tents. So I joined them. And one day I was going to go past the farmhouse where Eric lived and to go out to the tents. And I saw that devotees were there. So there was, it was Nartamananda was there. I remember there was kind of, this with this long sika. And he and whoever else was with him had brought a lot of the leftover Sunday feast for Eric, because obviously he was becoming a devotee. And so then they invited us over, and I remember so clearly that they gave me a samosa and a little bit of sweet rice. And I was like, oh my God, this is just nectar. What is this? And it was so good. And then I went off to the tent, and late at night, everybody was into their eating brown rice and stuff, and we're cooking brown rice over the smoking and getting the munchies and, cooking some brown rice or something, and I said, yeah, there's all those things that Krishna's brought, Eric's got a whole bowl of that stuff, those pastries and that sweet, I saw him put it in his fridge, why don't we go steal it? So we did. In the middle of the night, no lights. We're trying to, make our way through the forest to the farmhouse and climb into the window. And we stole the sweet rice, and all of it. We took everything. And we went back out there, and we were hysterical, that we were pulling this off. And we ate all the, like samosa after samosa, sweet rice, prasadam, and we got completely intoxicated. We were rolling and laughing, and but the next day Eric was furious. He was so furious. He said, "You're gonna all have to get off of my land," and he really didn't like it. So soon after that, there was a more kind of a family. Hippie family, but more of the Sattvic type, who had a little farm near Eric's, and they asked me if I could stay with their kids for a few days. So I went over there, and I didn't know it, but they were also a little bit becoming devotees. And so I was, cooking for these kids. They were like, 7, 10, 5, something like that. And, so the older kid, after I cooked, she said, wait, no, wait. We have to offer it. And I was like, offer it? What do you mean? And she said, no, we have to offer everything to Krishna. And so I was like, well, I just didn't know what she meant at all. So she said, I'll take it. I have to put it on a special plate. It has to be a clean plate. And then they had a picture. Then I hadn't noticed. They had like a little altar. And then I saw her bow down and ring a bell and say something. And I just remember watching her and feeling so like humbled and small and curious and like, what is this, And then she said, it's prasadam. Now it's prasadam. We only eat prasadam. So I was like, wow, that's cool. So yeah, we'll do that. Okay, you just do that whenever I cook. And then I saw they had like a big library, all spiritual books, like everything you can imagine. But they had, and I remember I'd go in there to choose a book to read, and there was the little purple Bhagavad Gita. And it seemed like every time I went in there, there was like lights flashing and arrows pointing, read this book, read this book. And so I would pull it out and open it up and read a bit, and I just like, I couldn't get past this. What this is like about a battle, this is like about a war. And again, it was the same thing of like not having enough punya, enough agyata sakriti yet, or anything to be able to enter into it. I was trying to read it. And I'd read bits and I'd think, yeah, that's good, that's a good thing. But I just didn't want to stick with it. And I put it back and read something else very easily, anything, whatever I picked up, just read it. So, I was puzzled. I was getting more and more puzzled about what to do with my life and what was right, because like there were these more sattvic hippies that were, moving on into the nature. And, so I had to take a little bit care of the garden while they were gone, So, I would do as usual, take a hit of acid or, smoke some dope and then go out to the garden and, pulling weeds. And I just became so puzzled, like, why am I'm killing one thing so that another thing can live? Like, what's right? How can you live without doing something bad? I understood about karma. I understood about reincarnation to some extent and karma. But like, how can I not do bad karma? What's wrong with, like I'm pulling these weeds out, they're supposed to be the bad guys and these are the good guys, but I'm killing the bad guys. So you can see, you just can't figure things out. You need association, you need guidance, and so soon after that, I wound up, I don't know how it happened, but I wound up staying in Canada in a cabin with, there was he was kind of a devotee. I didn't know it at the time. His name was Bob Blake. And he and a few of my other friends, we wound up going up there and staying with Bob in his cabin. And we also didn't know that he was offering his food. And he had BTGs. And so he was finding there used to be recipes. So he was making like devotee prasadam. And we didn't know, but we were definitely getting the effect of it. So at one point we wanted to go down to Detroit. This was like maybe a 3-hour drive from Detroit. And we wanted to go to a pop festival that was happening. And Bob said, well, I can drive you, but the thing is that I go to the Krsna temple on Sunday, and so I want to go there and I want to have the feast. And it's like, if you want to ride, you come with me there. So it was kind of like, okay, if that's what we have to do to get to the pop festival. I wasn't particularly, I'm so eager to go. Unfortunately, I wish I could say I was more pious, but I wasn't. But I remember walking in the door and having a very vivid sensation that I had just walked into another dimension. It was so different, like the energy. That's all I could understand at the time, that it was Vaikuntha. But I felt it. I felt it was so different inside there, and I felt so humbled by just walking in there. And the first thing I saw there was this big picture of, it's a picture of, I think, Narada Muni, or is it a devotee flying through the sky with his japa beads and with all the planets behind. I mean, it was just like, it just blew me away completely, that picture. And then, you know, coming into the temple room, and I don't remember seeing the altar or anything. I just remember that everybody bowed down, and it totally freaked me. Wow, everybody's on the ground. And I'm like, my first thing is, I'm not going to do that. And then the next second, I'm on the ground. Yes, you are. And then it felt good. I thought, yeah, that was the right thing to do. And so I didn't really remember what happened, but I just felt so awkward. Like, I'm in this another planet here, you know. So I remember, of course, I was intoxicated, and I was hungry, and then it was prasadam time. So then I was watching, and at that time, they used to have the devotees would get 2 plates because this was it for them. This was the big day where they got really nice prasadam. The rest of the week was really simple. And so they used to have like a sweet plate and a salty plate. And they would give the guests quite tiny little portions. Of course, it maybe seemed a little more extreme to me in my state of mind. And, you know, because they didn't want the non-devotees, the karmis, to waste any prasadam. And so I sat down and I'm looking at this little plate, and I'm like, wow, you know, that's not very much. And then a devotee, his name is Jamadagni, who is a famous devotee for all he wrote a lot of the songs for Michael Cassidy, what's his name? A lot of those like very amazing songs. He's a poet. He's a genius. He's an absolute genius. Very talented person. And so he sits down to talk to me. Now this is the first time I'm really going to have a conversation with a devotee one-on-one. So he sits down with these 2 giant plates, and he'd piled his even higher than the other devotees. And I've got this little thing. And I'm looking at him, and I'm thinking, God, you're really a pig, you know? You got these 2 big plates. Look what I got. I'm the guest. And so he starts speaking. And now probably at that time, the Bhagavatam was coming out in sections. It was the process of creation, probably just came out. Because he sat down, and he just started telling me that whole section of the Bhagavatam, how, you know, there's Lord Lord Vishnu, and from his navel comes a lotus flower, and on top of it there's Lord Brahma, and he's eating and speaking like a mile a minute. And I'm thinking, this guy is stark raving mad. And then suddenly he'd say something that would make so much sense. And I think, no, he's speaking such high subject matter that I can't even follow him. I can't follow what he's saying. And it was like, and then I started really trying to listen, but I was really hungry. And then somebody came by, and I didn't realize it was a maha plate. And I just went, oh, thanks. I'm so hungry. I took the whole maha plate and I started eating from it. And, you know, of course, the devotees, they couldn't do anything after that. But I remember there was like this awkward silence or whatever. And so I ate all the maha. And I was pretty happy with that. But, you know, I just didn't know what to think. But I thought, wow, this philosophy, I've never heard anything like this at all. So then in the meantime, the people that I came with, Bob went upstairs. I didn't know where he was. And another 2 friends was Candy. she became a devotee, and somebody else, we used to call her Foot, who knows why, Candy and Foot, they were there. And Bob comes down from upstairs, and he's a shaved head. Now, he was a very handsome guy with really long hair, and he comes out. I was just appalled. What did you do? You know, wow, you look terrible. And he said, well, I'm just going to stay here. I'm going to become a devotee. And you can take the van and you can stay in the cabin. I don't mind. And then Foot and Candy said, well, we want to stay here too. Could we stay here? And they're like, yeah, sure, you could stay here. And I was like, what? I'm not staying here. I'm going to the pop festival. So I drove off in the van, and they stayed there. And at the pop festival, I remember, now this is the result of taking Mahaprasadam. It was horrible. Everything sounded, every band sounded off. Everyone seemed super superficial. And I was like, oh, God, I was really trying to enjoy, and it was impossible. It just was impossible. And so then I went back. This is just, Krishna was just like slowly roping me in, because I just wasn't somebody that could have just been pulled right in. One thing after another, a little bit of prasadam, a little more mantras, a little this and that, and slowly, getting to a point where I could come to Krishna, but still. I went back to the cottage and continued on with whatever. And I did come back to visit my friends and to go to the temple again. On another occasion, I brought another friend with me. And I remember at that time, the friend I was with was quite, knowledgeable of Eastern philosophy and stuff. And so he was asking really good questions. So I was sitting in the middle, and he was talking to Dina Dayadri. And if you know her, she's a very kind of sober and very calm sort of person. And I was so impressed by her, because he was just like coming off with these kind of not super challenging, but a little bit challenging questions. What about this? And she just fairly coolly and calmly, she just explained one thing after another, crystal clear, perfect answer. And I was like, okay, she's right, And I remember him saying, well, why do you have to hear everything in like the Sanskrit, And Prabhupada was playing. And I remember that we stopped for a minute and we were listening. And I thought, what is that sound? I knew that I never heard sound like that. What is that sound? And then she said, no, we understand. He said, well, you don't even understand. They're just saying all these Sanskrit prayers, singing. And she said, no, I understand. And she said, so she listened. And we listened to Prabhupada, and then she said, no, he's saying, and then she told us, and I was like, this woman is like on another level, this is amazing. And so she invited me, because she was talking while she was making garlands, and she said, would you like to also make a garland? And I don't know what's a garland, but yeah, okay, whatever, okay. So she gave me some flowers and a string, and I started my first devotional service. And I'm just trying to follow what she's doing. And then I must have put it on the floor, and then she goes, oh, no, take it off the floor. And I was like, why? And she said, it's for the Lord. And I was like, the Lord? That's like, religion? You know, you had this word that just brings up everything that you know, had already weren't interested in, you know? And it was like, and she said, yeah, everything we do is for the pleasure of the Lord. And I was like, that was like, mm. What does that mean? You know, I had no concept of devotion or personalism. All these books, all these philosophy, everything, nothing was about devotion. You know, so I felt like, I just felt so tiny and like I didn't know how to do anything, and that I was just, okay, I'll put it back on the cloth and try to make something for the Lord. But initially, that just hearing the word the Lord, it wasn't appealing. Like, I didn't think that this had anything to do with religion. I thought this was about mantras and about expanding your consciousness, but doing it like in a better way than drugs, you know. So all of a sudden, this is like taking on a religious turn. And, you know, I had to like adjust my mind to it, you know, what it all meant. But, you know, and then I saw Diane, who had gone, she was devotee now there in Detroit. And so she was like, oh, you're here. And, but Diane was really, I mean, she was so changed. She was all, you know, tight, pinned up, you know, and oh, Krishna, Krishna. And I just didn't like it. I just didn't like how she was. I was like, come on, you were just like having sex with people, you know, 3 weeks ago. And now you're like, I don't know, like a nun or something. And she was like, and she said, oh, look, I'll show you Krishna. And so she showed me this picture that was on the incense, spiritual sky incense. I think it was a picture of Mahavishnu. And she said, that's Krishna. And I was like, so that's God. And she said, yeah. But you know, she was like, I don't know, just real sentimental in how she was presenting it. And I was like, okay, whatever. I didn't really have any, no kind of bells went off in me. I wasn't attracted to the picture of Mahavishnu. I was just, well, whatever. But, you know, I don't want to be like Diane, you know. I mean, it's terrible to say. She was a nice devotee, but that was how that was my impression, that, oh, now they become like all like, now she's like a saint or something, you know. And I was like, yeah, I remember you not long ago. But so, you know, so I had this like, I had a very good experience with Dina Dayadri, and then not so much with, you know, what else was going on there. So, you know, I returned to the cottage and, you know, I was feeling really miserable, disenchanted. The whole hippie scene to me, it was just imploding. And I knew, you know, I couldn't get any higher on any kind of intoxication. I had hit the ceiling. It doesn't go, you know, I couldn't go any further with that. It was not happening. And, you know, I could just see so much hypocrisy and so much that didn't, you know, what to do. I was not, you know, I really had turned away from mainstream life, you know, and I did not want to return. And, you know, but, you know, it was interesting to even think the whole hippie movement, you know, was a very radical time. You know, why did that happen? How did that happen? I mean, there's many layers of understanding. Some even say it was, you know, the CIA, or, you know, there's all kinds of views on why it happened. But, you know, to me, in retrospect, looking, you know, it was primarily so that Lord Chaitanya's mission could come in and flourish, that things would be ripe. When Srila Prabhupada came, you know, it was perfect timing. It's like the stage had been set for him to walk in, you know, because there were things that, you know, they got some things right. We're turning to more, you know, Eastern philosophical viewpoints and the yoga craze and, you know, self-help and all that. vegetarianism and veganism and the environmental activism. It all, that was beginning, what was beginning. But, I was feeling like, I've been through my life now so far just going like, Nati, Nati, Nati. No, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this, but what is it? I was just throwing out, finding a fault in any philosophical view or any guru or whatever. I saw so many things when I was in California, all different types of groups and, but what's the truth? It wasn't, I didn't feel like I was looking for a spiritual master or a guide particularly, but, I was looking for truth and for purpose. And, later I understand a little bit from my astrology. I have this Mula Nakshatra, I can't say it properly, which means that you like to get down to the root or the bottom of things, So I felt like that's what, but it's not enough to get down to see the downside of the material energy or the stupid things or the false things. What's the solution? And so, while I was back there at the cottage, I saw there were lots of BTGs. I started reading the BTGs and chanting. And particularly, I saw that book, I think it's Krsna, the Reservoir of Pleasure. There's 3 essays in there. And Prabhupada is just, everything that he said was so simple and clear and profound. And, I remember him saying that the root cause of all problems is falsely identifying the body to be the self, that all issues and isms, whether it's about gender or skin color or religious affiliation or social status or nationality, whatever, it all springs forth from this mistake. And that unless this mistake is corrected, then there will always be discrimination and prejudice and discord. You can't stop it, and he gave the example of how, you can't just water the leaves of the tree, you have to water the root, And I saw Prabhupada was just getting right to the heart of every issue. He's just getting to the root of the problems, that you have to change your consciousness. You can't just change by laws or activism or this. People have to change their consciousness, and that they have to take up a process to purify their hearts so that they can get this kind of vision of equality, and that liberation, real liberation, everybody's talking about freedom and liberation. It would, that liberation would be to get out entirely from the bodily concept of life, and to stop the cycle of repeated birth and death. And it was just, yes, everything is so right and so perfect. And then there was one article of who was crazy, and that really got me, because I thought, I'm not so crazy. I started to think I was crazy. But yeah, who is crazy? That's a great article. And Prabhupada just so clearly explained the purpose of human life and how it should not be wasted. And everything just resonated so clearly, so clearly. And I understood it's just not enough to just know things. It's not an end in itself, that I couldn't just go on, reading and speculating forever and never really, change. And that, if you were getting knowledge, that knowledge was supposed to, take me somewhere, some practical end. And, unless it was practically applied, then, what's the point of it? It was like getting all dressed up and having nowhere to go. It just wasn't enough. That I knew, I had to admit that I would have to practice, I would have to follow, I would have to live the knowledge in order to get the real experience of it. That I had been in my head long enough and now I needed to engage my heart. And so I knew that if I was honest, if I was being honest with myself, I had to accept that all I read was absolutely true, and that the devotees were not just talking, but they were living a life, and they were practicing, and they were putting their beliefs into practice. And, and then I had to admit, I have to go to the temple. I have to at least try. I mean, I was still reluctant. The philosophy's great, but oh God, joining a group and a totally new way of life, and it's like serious stuff, and it was scary. But, I just pushed myself, and I said, well, I have nowhere to go now. I'm done. I went everywhere. I did it all. I've been there, done that, and I've got to do this. And so I remember I went out and I started hitchhiking. Now this was like where cabins are out in the kind of like a foresty area. So, there weren't many cars coming down the dusty road. So it wasn't so likely that I was going to get, I had 3 hours drive to get to Detroit to go back to the temple. And then it started drizzling, and I was feeling like, why am I doing it? I don't, there was just this resistance. And I thought, oh, it's starting to rain, an excuse. I'll go back. Never mind. Never mind. And then when I was thinking that, a car pulled up. I didn't even have my thumb out, and it just stopped, rolled down the window, said, do you need a ride? And I was like, oh. Well, no, I was thinking, to forget it because it's raining. He's like, no, where are you going? I said, well, I'm trying to go to Detroit. And he said, I'm going to Detroit. And I was like, oh, I had this kind of joyful sinking feeling at the same time. I knew I was just being roped in. And I'm still going, I don't know. And so I said, well, okay, I guess you're going right to Detroit. Okay. So I get in the car, and then I ask him where he's going. And it turns out where he was going was exactly across the street from the temple. I mean, Detroit is a big city, and I'm 3 hours away. What are the chances? So Krishna's arrangements, amazing. So I just knew, almost against my will, Krishna's just like, so kind, so merciful. Even we're still, I don't know. So he dropped me right in front of the temple. And there I was. And I didn't arrive like, I wish I could say, like so many devotees, that, wow, I was just in such bliss and I was in ecstasy. And, but, I was impious. And I didn't feel that way. I was just like, well, maybe they're not really following it, or, I was still this hesitancy. But I knew that I can't take the philosophy without the lifestyle. So I bravely marched into the temple.